$100 for the mission, right? Which is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the primary reason. Secondary reason is it's not going to hit monthly cash flow, right? So the stat we saw before on the presentation, 90% of people's wealth is in investments, property, retirement accounts. It is not in their checking account, right? So offering a way to give stock is going to unlock a bigger gift. People are sitting on stocks that have grown in value, and because people feel like they're giving from an abundance of wealth rather than sacrificing their mortgage payment, cash on hand, things that they use for everyday expenses, it feels less painful.
Mhm. And I know I've used this before where I'm like, hey, you could get the same amount of donors if you think about kind of the average. I think I should double check the numbers. Check my numbers, but it's something like dozens and dozens of online credit card gifts for $128 each is the equivalent of one stock gift. And so when you're looking at averages, right? So it's kind of like which one do you want? And it's kind of a trick question because you want all of the donors, right? But when you're building relationships, I think you don't want to forget that smaller percent who can give those larger major gifts and kind of get into this process. And usually once they give once, they'll do it again.
Yeah.
And if I know I mean, we're advisors, right? And we understand nonprofits. So if we're getting into the weeds, really what we want you to hear is that it saves your donors money and it gets you a bigger gift. So when we talk about a win-win and tax efficiencies and this different way of doing things, the donors probably understand it's good for you to have at least a high level. So you're like, hey, it's tax efficient. You could save about 30% on taxes and we get a bigger gift. It would really help our mission. Even if you just can say kind of that high level and have that knowledge, it's usually really helpful. When in doubt, you can say you should consult with your advisor, but here's what we know and we want to make it easy for you. So yeah, I appreciate you weighing in on that. All right. Educating donors and making the ask because I know we had I think someone write in the Q&A really early on and they're like, yes, yes, I have a brokerage account, which first is great because 90% of nonprofits do not have a brokerage account. So that's why we started with that is we're like, all right, so many of you don't have it and there's a reason is because it's really complicated as you become a more mature nonprofit or you've been around longer, often you start to get that and you'll kind of realize all the different pain points that exist these days. 10 years ago, it was a lot easier for a nonprofit to have a brokerage account than it is today. But then it's often like, okay, well, we have one. Why aren't we getting stock gifts? And often it's donors can't give what they don't know they can give. And especially when you're a small to mid-sized organization, if they're not finding it on your website or they can't see or they don't understand or it's too many hoops to jump through, kind of like Casey's story of I know Jay, it was that idea of like they wanted to give that and the nonprofit was like, email us. And then are they responding? Where does it go? Is the brokerage account still open? What's the D2C? How are they handling it? What are you going to do with those funds? I know we get different nonprofits who are like, hey, in order to receive this grant, it's via stocks, and we have to show what our financial plan is to receive this big gift, which we help them with. So that is where it kind of the requirements and expectations, I think, for larger gifts does start to shift. So, Casey, I know donors can't give what they don't know they can give. So the question is, how should a nonprofit be educating their supporters about stock, crypto, and DAF giving?
Yeah, such a good question. And this is definitely like one of the most common questions and things I think that I help with at least the most or try to from a client success perspective. But number one, I would say is talk about it constantly. So the clients that we see do the best with non-cash giving are the ones who are not shying away from talking about it with donors. Easiest way to do that first is actually not even by talking, is just displaying it on your website prominently. So do not wait for a donor to ask for it because usually they won't. Again, kind of that chicken and egg problem, but they know that you're a nonprofit team, which means you're probably either volunteers or you're doing too many people's jobs as one person. So, like, they don't want to burden you with a new ask for a new way to give. Make it easy for them by offering it up front and stick it on your website so that they can find it very easily. After that, then it is actually that talking. And then again, this can be through emails too. So in a monthly newsletter, for example, consider spotlighting a new way of giving, such as either stocks, crypto, DAFs. Pick one for each month, something like that. Can link to some helpful articles or videos. We help supply some to our clients, for example, and speak to those benefits of gifting those asset types. So the double tax efficiency of stock gifts, for example. Share with your donors why it's good for them too. If there are other tax incentive programs in your state or municipality that are going on, piggyback on those and create a campaign around the tax benefits. One of our clients, one of the Habitat for Humanity state offices, did this really successfully starting last year. They went from accepting zero stock gifts in their past. Their state had a tax incentive program. They piggybacked on that and combined that with a stock gifting campaign, and they raised a few $100,000 in a summer after never accepting a gift prior to that, and now they get multiple a week. So it's been really cool to see. Other big times would be around holidays, Giving Tuesday, end of year giving, especially. Again, these gifts largely have to do with tax advantages for donors. And so when it gets to the end of the year, they're looking for ways to help out that year's taxes. And that means giving major gifts to nonprofits in these ways. So that's going to be a great time to run some special holiday campaigns and things like that.
Yeah. It's it's low-hanging fruit, right? But it almost seems really obvious if you just put yourself in the donor's shoes and go to your website and you think, how do they know they can give you a stock gift? And then what is that process, right? I think often when we talk to folks, I'm like, hey, I didn't see it anywhere on your website. Where is it? And they're like, oh, it's not there. But if they want to do it, they'll just reach out. And we just have to be careful because we're assuming, right? A lot of donors will do that. You have relationships with these donors. These aren't usually cold, like inbound gifts. Occasionally they are, but not always. But at the same time, it's like they're looking at, every time you push and you say give and there's a button, they're going to that donate button and they're like, how do I do this? The other thing to think about is kind of that real traditional way, which these days with technology and advisors and just kind of the growth of these kind of gifts is what is that process? Is it, hey, download this PDF, fill it out, fax it over here, tell your advisor, don't forget to call our office, right? And then it's this whole process. And then on the back end, like we have a church that we serve, and they were like, hey, we only got about 8 stock gifts last year. We've got a brokerage account, we've got a system, it's not a big deal. But there's about four that we don't know exactly who it's from. And I'm like, that's kind of a big deal. And they're like, yeah, our donors are upset. And they're like, you didn't even thank me. But a traditional system doesn't have names attached to those gifts. So it's like you have to think about the front end experience. Are you asking about it? Is it on your website? And then also, is it easy and accessible for that donor? Or are you requiring phone calls and downloading PDFs and wet ink and emails? And then even on the other side, how quick are you at confirming the gift? Do you have a process in place where you always know who that donor is and you can find it? And so that full kind of journey is what you want to think about. And then I would just highlight again what Casey said is that we always say that non-cash giving has to be a part of your culture of giving. It has to be a part of your regular everyday giving conversations. There should be no ask or call for cash gifts and credit card gifts without mentioning these other kinds of opportunities. On a very like candid, relatable level, think about like if you're scrolling Instagram, how many times do you need to see an ad for something before you purchase it, right? And some of that social psychology, right, and selling psychology actually applies to philanthropy as well, is that generally it's you have to have that ask an average of 7 times before you move forward. So it's not enough to be like, oh yeah, and we do stock gifts end of year, right? It's more like, hey, is this a part of that? And the reason you kind of pull at that thread is it has that whole process of, are you an organization who can handle major gifts? Are you going to steward that gift with care? Do you have a process where you're going to liquidate it and all of that? So get it on your website, make it easy, repeat, 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 and talking about it and kind of putting it forward as opportunities because again, it helps your donors. Um, So in that kind of process, often storytelling is really helpful. And I know one of the questions I had here is like, what are stories of nonprofits that started promoting this type of stock or asset-based giving and saw a big impact? And one of the stories that I often share, with their permission, is that there is a church who was doing a large capital campaign. And they had never received stock gifts. And they were like, we know we're supposed to kind of be doing this. There's different ways to do it, but we're doing this capital campaign and we really want to try to get some of these major gifts. And so we gave them all the tools, right? We got them all set up. And what they did is they looked at their high capacity donors in the church who they knew were interested, right? They knew that they were kind of interested in this campaign and they did a dinner. And they did, I think it was 16 people they told me at this dinner. And in that dinner, they, of course, shared about the mission and the campaign. And then they also talked about the tax efficiencies and the ability they now have to receive stock gifts. 15 out of the 16 end up making gifts via stocks from that dinner, which I love that story. I was like, oh my gosh, tell me more. Like, how did you do this so we can tell other people? And one of the questions that I immediately had, which you may be thinking too, is I was like, yeah, but the majority of them probably already would have given. Did it make any impact? And across the board, they were like, the majority of these gifts ended up being larger than what they thought that initial pledge would be from the individuals because of the tax savings. And once they spelled it out to everybody, their kind of challenge back was like, so we actually, ask, would you even increase it by 20 or 30% because the tax savings you're getting to give us a fuller gift? So take that with what you will. Every organization is different. You have different opportunities, but I do know that they had a lot of success with that. We wanted to give you a tactical example. Casey or Connor, do you have any other stories of like maybe how a nonprofit had success asking for stock gifts?
Well, I shared the habitat one, but then what I was gonna say is just too, I think in relation to all of this and how to talk about it, I know again as a treasurer and being in this situation, I think my biggest fear was if I bring up stock gifts, the donor might ask me about stock gifts, and like I don't know, before I worked here, I do now, but I didn't know what the difference between securities and stocks and all these different terms and like liquidation and what's going on with that. And so I was fearful of getting questions back to me. The really nice thing about if you are DIYing it, unfortunately, you may have to answer some of those questions. If you are going to go with a partner and you have a third party fiduciary, it takes the onus off of you. And so you don't need to know. And you can still give the donor the confidence that you're going to be able to steward that gift properly because you've got a third party fiduciary managing that process. Again, you've got it on the website. So if you put yourself in the donor's shoes, the donor's seeing it on your website, they're assuming you're processing these gifts for other donors too. So they're not going to be the first big gift that you've ever handled. And so you can confidently share with them, like, yes, we've got it in place. I may not know the nuances, I may not know all the terms, but that's fine because we have a brokerage firm that does, who's our partner. So I think that's like one of the biggest things to take that kind of like almost like accountability or fear off your back, which I know I had personally.
All right. So Connor, I'm gonna throw this one to you, but I know a lot of the questions that we get too is okay, maybe you got big stock gift and we're looking at hey, it's a capital campaign, but we're still raising the campaign. We're not going to spend it for maybe a year or two, or oh, this is a unexpected. Yay, we love those, right? A big unexpected gift that'll go for programming, but we're not quite ready to spin it down, which is common with major gifts, right? It's like, hey, it either has a very clear purpose, there may be a delay in the spend down, maybe they even want it to do an endowment or something like that. So, what are some smart ways nonprofits can think about those reserve funds or endowment funds or kind of these large stock gifts like around long-term sustainability? You get the gift. We don't often talk about what you do with the gift once you get it.
Yeah. And you kind of even called it out in the question, right? And it's one of the main things we talk to clients about is matching your investments to your time horizon. So if you are doing a capital campaign and you're planning, okay, we'll use this money next year or in 2 years, that's something that you're going to want to put into a reserve portfolio. So treasury bills are doing great right now, money market funds, or even a diversified fixed income portfolio, you know, made of bonds. Um, but if you are looking for something longer term, you know, this is a capital campaign for, I know we have some customers where they have like 40-year time horizons for buildings, for example, right? With those, you can put them into more traditional portfolios like stocks and bonds portfolios. A lot of our clients, when it is a longer term portfolio, will recommend something like 70% stocks, 30% bonds. It does depend on the client. Um, but matching that investment to the time horizon is going to be the most important thing. And having a clear investment policy statement can really help with that. So this is a document that's going to set your target asset allocation, how much risk you're willing to take, and also your spending policies. But really, it just keeps you disciplined and also protects you from some of the emotional decisions you might make when markets swing, right? But it also keeps you connected with the board. So typically, this is a document the board will approve, and then you kind of have a little less weight on your shoulders, right? Knowing that, okay, the board has approved this. If you do go with a third party fiduciary like Infinite Giving, you also have us as well who will help manage all the investments. But having that document is super helpful. We regularly help create those, but I believe, Karen, we also have a link on our website to a free template
Mhm.
for an IPS. But then also, as well as having, looking into those two things, just also regularly reviewing the accounts, but also rebalancing. Markets can move a lot. This year, we've seen them take massive swings. So regularly checking your allocations, what started as 70% stocks, 30% bonds, by the end of the year could be 90% stocks, 10% bonds. So keeping an eye on those accounts is very important.
Yeah. So much of it is often missed opportunity cost where it's like, hey, no, 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 we can't invest. This is a capital campaign. We're going to start building in a year and a half. And I'm like, okay, sitting in a checking account, sitting in a savings account at 0.08, maybe your bank money market is like 1.5 or 2%. You're not even going to keep up with inflation over the next year or year and a half by the time you start building. So a lot of what we talk about too is, hey, when you receive it, like Infinite Giving, we help you receive and manage those donations. But a lot of that is just like stewardship. And those we bring that up because a lot of major gift donors are like, hey, well, once we give this to you, where's it going? Where is it going to sit? If it's sitting in a bank account, not doing anything, not FDIC covered, that's also a red flag. So you want to be able to have a plan where it's like, actually, it's going with a fiduciary partner, low risk, high liquid. Our money market's like 4.2%, right? So it's like, let's sit it somewhere where it can at least be really conservative, but it can grow and be stewarded well until it's time to build.
Yeah.
Um, and so always think about, hey, we're getting that gift. What do we do with it? And if you're not deploying it immediately, just make sure you're stewarding it in a way that would make the donor pleased and build trust.
Yeah.
So I know
That's
we're.
one of the
Mhm.
That's
Go.
that's one of the first things we did at the Divinity Project. We got a massive seven-figure gift. First thing we did was put it into treasury bills.
Mhm.
I'm sure the donor was happy that we were stewing it, in a good in a good way and looking after it and not just letting it, get destroyed by inflation.
Yes. And you just don't want to be asked or have a plan, especially as a development officer, right? And you're sitting there saying, oh, yes, we can take these big gifts. We have this infrastructure. And then it's, well, where's it going? Or what are you doing with it? And not having a clear answer. Because that's a part of that journey of that stock gift. Okay, so we have just a few more minutes. So here's the question we're going to end with is, why do you think so many nonprofits either aren't asking for stock gifts or they're not receiving them? What's holding them back and how can we shift the mindset? Casey, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. I think it goes back to kind of the two main things, which I feel like I've talked about a lot, which is first being the chicken and the egg problem. Again, just that if you aren't offering an easy way to do it that's easily findable, you may not even know that you're missing out on stock gifts already because donors may not ask you about it. And that leads to that second issue, which is that confidence, the confidence in the donor of saying, can they handle it? Can Can they not? Have they done it before? If it's on your website or there's an easy way to do it, gives them that confidence. But then it also gives you the confidence as a nonprofit to ask for those gifts and to put it into your culture of ask. Talk about it because you then are confident you've got the process in place and a partner who's going to help you manage it. So I think it's those two main things that go together, which all around confidence at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it is, and I think people are they don't know what to say, right? To your point before, they don't know how to explain it, but it's you just need to use plain language. Instead of talking about capital gains tax harvesting, you can just say, by giving stock, you might pay less tax, and it could afford a bigger gift. Use stories, very helpful to talk to donors in stories, like the example I gave about Karen before, and just reassuring that you're there to help, right? Um, your team, if they can help the donation, or if you use a service like Infinite Giving, we would help with that. And just reminding the donor that giving stock means more goes to the cause that you care about instead of to the tax man, pretty much. And a caveat as well. I know we've said a lot about stocks, but the same applies for cryptocurrencies as well. So if you are donating cryptocurrencies, the tax efficiencies are pretty much the same. And we also offer the same services.
I always say with crypto, I'm like, you don't have to like it and you don't have to understand it. But
Yeah.
what you can know is that there are donors out there who are giving crypto gifts. And the IRS treats cryptocurrency gifts just like they do security gifts, right? Securities and stocks, essentially the same thing, right? So stock gifts. So it has all the same tax efficiencies and benefits. And I think sometimes, we're always trying to look at we as nonprofits, right? You're always trying to look at how do we get these big gifts? But then we kind of it starts to get lost a little bit when we're not sure and we don't have the right partners or tools to make that happen. Um, and I think one of the things that we really want to take a moment just before we close is what makes receiving these non-cash easier and how Infinite Giving was built specifically to help nonprofits do this better than anyone else. Clearly, we're biased, but I think a big piece of that is that we have 0% transaction fees on stocks. So there are other solutions. None of them are going to give you the brokerage account, and they're all charging roughly 3 to 5% on each stock gift. And a donor doesn't want that, right? They don't want to know, like, oh, I'm giving them this gift and they've got this partner, but then there's such a huge transaction fee. So just remember that we're doing 0 transaction fees on stock gifts. If you don't have a brokerage account, with 30 minutes of your time and 3 business days, we can get you all up and going. Brokerage account opening, we can get it up on your website. And of course, we're only serving nonprofits. So whether we're helping you receive that stock gift, we're liquidating it, advisory support, or even kind of cash management, money market, and treasury rates, the idea is that we are an all-in-one fiduciary partner who can help you with these. So you don't have to have all the answers. You have a partner who does. We help with donor messaging, board education, post-gift guidance. We do all of that. And really just want you to be successful because we believe that more nonprofits and leaders like you guys, as the more successful you are, the better society and communities we will all have. So, with that, we're going to thank you for spending time with us today. Here's your big reminder: don't leave major gifts on the table. Your donors are holding their wealth in these assets and they're looking for smart, generous ways to give. And we want you to be one of those people. So, with the right tools, messaging, and brokerage set up, you can receive these gifts seamlessly, grow your fundraising significantly. Remember the stat from Dr. Russell James: nonprofits who ask for stock gifts in addition to cash raise 55% more over a 5-year period. So it takes time, it takes, a giving culture, and the easier you can make it, but the data is there. So if you're ready to get started or want help with your brokerage account, donor materials, or investment policy, or any of that, we would love to support you. Feel free to reach out here, and we're excited to get everyone going with end of year giving. So we're wishing you much success. Thank you.
I just saw the note about the clock on my wall. And I just wanted to add a quick note there. Our recording did cut off, so we'll just need to combine the two recordings and then we'll send the recording out to everyone that's on this call.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.